Hello, today we're going to be answering some hard-hitting questions like how would mastering the track matting tool in After Effects improve your skill as a motion designer, and would that help alleviate my tinnitus? So yeah, let's take a look. Right, so I'm gonna start off with an overgeneralization of my audience here, but I'm assuming that most of you guys would understand how these track matte tabs here works in After Effects. So for those who don't know, I'm just gonna go through their functionalities very briefly, and then we can move on to their applications. And if you cannot find these tabs, by the way, all you need to do is trigger these buttons over here. So in our composition here, we have a text layer that says cow and a picture appropriately of a cow chewing on the fence and the background layer. If we consider this picture of the cow as our master layer, then we can go in here to the matte selection of that layer, and we can pick whichever layer we want to be the target of that layer. Or we can take this pick whip over here and put it onto another layer. I'm gonna choose this one and marry it to the cow text layer. And by default, the track matte tool allows the picture to take the text layer's alpha channel, basically all the information that makes up the borders of the layers, and superimpose itself onto that channel. And you can invert that selection by clicking on this box here. And that way the picture would take the border information of the text and completely avoid that area. And this whole effect here is totally live. You can change the attributes of each individual layers. Same thing happens if we try to make the borders of the type a little less opaque, maybe by adding a fast box blur effect and then blur up the edges of the type. And that would mean increasing the area covered by the border of the text. However, because the borders is now blurred up, the alpha information of the pixels lying around the edges over here that is being blurred up will be much less dominant compared to those lying safely inside of the text. And so that means the area that contains the picture of the cows over here would also be increased, however much more transparent. And speaking of transparency, let's move on to the Luma Matte. So let's disable this track matting operation here, enable this cow text, and let's marry the track matte of the cow text to that of the picture. And switch from the alpha matte to the Luma Matte. The text is now being applied based on the variety of brightness level in the picture. So if we enable this picture again, you're gonna see that the top part of the fur over here of the cow is white, meaning that the text will be much more opaque and there will be much less transparency. Meanwhile, the other values, for example, this part here of the ear and in the eye, that will be completely transparent. So in order to prove that, I'm gonna disable this cow picture as well as the background color, and I'm gonna turn on the transparency mode so you can see better. Actually, I'm gonna just change the text color as well. So now the text is full on black, meaning that this part over here, which is just opposed on the white fur, comes through the most. And on the other hand, the part where the eye and where the brown fur touches would have a little bit more in terms of transparency values. So now that you get the gist of the track matte tool, I think that maybe if you come from the world of Photoshop or Illustrator, you're gonna be more likely to liken this tool to something like Clipping Mask or maybe a Pathfinder, albeit much less functionalities. But whatever the case may be, I think this is one of the most important tools that you get as a motion designer, especially with the latest updates from Adobe, really upend the experience with track matting. So to provide a little segue into explaining how arduous this track matting operation used to be, track matting used to rely on the relationship of a layer and the layer above it. So right now I'm in Adobe After Effects CC 2015. You can have a pretty compelling argument to how 2015 used to be a better time than we are in now, but not so much for After Effects. So let's say, for instance, I want to track matte these two type layers into the alpha of this purple bar, which I've already animated so that it could slide out like a small lower third. So before the pick whip existed, what I need to do is actually duplicate this shape layer here, which is a bar underneath the type layer, put it up above the type layer, and inside of the type layer, I'm going to change the track matte to alpha matte shape layer 2. and that will take the information from the layer above and put it inside of that layer. So now when we play the animation back, you can see that the type layer remains inside of the vicinity of the shape layer. But on the other hand, we have a new duplicate of the shape layer. And as well, if we want to put the subtext here inside of the lower third, we would need to repeat the process again and duplicate this shape layer out, put it on top of the subtext, and change the track matte to alpha matte shape layer 3. So now what we have is looking like a complete reveal for a lower third. But the trade-off is that we have a pretty clunky setup of shape layers over here. And that would take up a lot of time and mental space away from doing actually creative work to just managing the duplicates of these shape layers, making sure they sync up. If only one layer is slightly off sync, you're not going to have the same result. And sometimes I would get to dozens of duplicates of the same layer for basically trying to be creative, trying to add more details into the same element. And that makes me feel like I was being punished for just trying to do my job. Now fast forward to 10 years later, and you can just take these two layers, take the track matte pick whip and put it onto the shape, turn the shape on again, and voila. Not only did you save the space for 2 extra duplicate layers, but also when you change the mask around, the original mask, that will apply accordingly, and appropriately so, not having to adjust the extra 2 layers. And that means you can just add extra elements into the bar without having to occupy more space. So in the end, how should you leverage this knowledge of the track matte tool? Well, once you get a hang of this tool, you want to think more about the world outside of the main object that you're animating. And I think that's the key, is pay more attention to the relationships between elements and see what storytelling device can be cultivated from those elements interacting with each other. You want to set up the scene more like a designer would. Take into account compositions, positive and negative spaces, complex geometry. And thinking about stuff like that makes you think harder about how can I propel the story in an interesting way that people would not expect. The following are 3 points why I think track matting is an important tool and how I've managed to apply it into motion design, starting with point number 1. So for the first one, we have a fairly simple animation of a ball going across this massive text. And with the track matte tool, we can help add more context to the scene, like maybe adding a shadow being cast from the ball onto the text. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this ball layer. Ball 2, I'm going to call that ball shadow. Drop it underneath the ball layer and take the pick whip and track matte it to the type layer. Now enable the type again, and since I'm already moving the ball using the position property, I'm going to move the position of the ball using the anchor point property in order to not create any conflict within the keyframe. So I'm going to hit A, bring up the anchor point, and just move it slightly to the left side like that, and also drop it down. And in the fill, I'm going to turn it to all black. Hit up scale as well, Shift S, and I'm just going to drop it down to maybe 13. Now it looks like the ball is casting a pretty solid shadow onto the text, and we can do more to customize the look of the shadow. For instance, we can add a fastbox blur and drag the blur radius up, and now we have a softer shadow from the ball to the text. And in some instances like this, when we freeze the frame, it's looking like it's providing a little bit more context in terms of depth in the scene, suggesting that this ball is lying on top of the D over here, and the shadow is really helping to sell that. And inversely, we can take advantage of this shadow look and turn it into some sort of a highlight. So in the ball shadow layer, I'm going to turn it color back into this bright orange. Anchor point, I'm going to drop it all to 0. So that returns to the middle. With the fastbox blur over here, I'm going to add in the deep glow effect as well. You can use any glow, but the deep glow for me is just like a shortcut. And then you can see this bright glow radiating across the text, and when you disable the text layer, the entire text disappears, but the alpha channel that's being touched by the highlight still remains. And that changes the meaning of the scene entirely. Now, like the ball seeking something in the dark, it's got this mysterious title sequence reveal look to it. we, the audience, is also seeking what the meaning of the text in the background is. And in the next few seconds, for example, if you copy the glow out and put it out into multiple part of the text like this, for example, you're starting to do a pretty effective reveal of what the text actually is. It's a pretty simple technique, but small details like this goes a long way in changing how viewers perceive the scene. The act of emphasizing an object or hiding an object engage with the audience sensibility, and in this case can even be used to convey something symbolic. So point number 2 would be heavily driven by this animation over here I made for a friend, and I animated her logo, which contains 6 individual petals, and inside each of them contains something like an arrangement of inversions that creates some sort of another flower over here. So what I could have done is to just animate the visible parts and then call it a day. But because I kind of see them as inversions, I kind of want them to animate in and have these sort of parts where they get subtracted from each other, and that way I get a little bit more abstract result from what otherwise could have been a plain looking animation. So since then, that's kind of what I want to think about moving forwards, is instead of thinking of animation as moving elements around, I kind of want to think more of them in terms of revealing and hiding elements away to create a more interesting, or in this case, a virtually impossible result without the help of track matting. So yeah, jumping back into After Effects, I'm going to show you guys really briefly how I achieved that look. So we have one shape layer here. We're going to need another one, so let's duplicate that, and we're going to move that one slightly to the right. Now put the track matte of the new petal onto the first one, and we have a sort of an oval shape over here. So this is meaning that the second petal is taking the alpha information of the first one and apply itself to that. Now what you want to do is enable the first petal again, and this time parenting the track matte of the first petal to that of the second one. And turn on that second petal layer again. Now this time both petals are just opposing onto each other, so they both take the shape of whatever it is intersecting between the two shapes. But if we apply an inversion of the track matte for both of the layers, you're gonna see that now both layers are taking whatever alpha information is intersecting between them and completely zeroing it out. So this part over here is completely void, transparent. Now the problem arises when you want to add another petal into the mix. So let's duplicate the second petal over here, and it will still keep that inverted alpha of the first petal as an option for the track matte. So when we decide to move it around, you're gonna see nothing is appearing. Even though this third petal is reacting to the alpha of the first one, evidently by soloing it out, you can see it's being cut out with the exact same alpha portion of the first petal. So in order to have it reacting to the third one, we'll need to apply another track matte option, which is unfortunately not allowed in this setting. So in order to make this to work, we'll need to find another way that we can apply multiple track matte options into one singular layer. So let's disable all of these track matte options over here. I'm going to highlight them all and hit Control or Command and click on this pick whip over here. And that will release all of the mattes. Unclick it, and in the effects and preset option, I'm gonna look for set matte, and let's apply it to the first petal. Now set matte as an effect achieves the same result as track matte, albeit with a few limitations if you're working with solids or pre-comp, for example, and I've covered those limitations in one of my old videos, and if you want to check it out, you can head over to this tab over here on the top right. But now let us repeat the process again using set matte. So take matte from layer, that would be selecting the target layer. So I'm going to choose petal number 2. And use for matte, we can either change it from the alpha channel, and there's various other channels that we can pick from, but right now I'm just going to stick with alpha channel, and then invert the matte. Same thing is going to apply with petal number 2. I'm going to put the set matte effect on there. Target would be the first petal, and invert the matte as well. So now the inversion between the first and the second petal returns. Now let's sort out the third one. I'm gonna apply the set matte on there as well, and select the first petal as a target. I'm gonna invert the matte on that. Let's go into the first petal over here, duplicate the set matte layer, and change the target from petal number 2 to petal number 3. Boom, so this time we have a second inversion area, this time pertaining to the relationship between the first petal and the third one. However, if we move that third petal around and touching the second one, no inversions would apply because we really haven't established the relationship between the third petal and the second petal just yet. The second one has no idea who this is and is refusing to interact. So let's copy out a new set matte, and we're going to take the matte from the second petal, and inside of the second petal, let's duplicate another set matte as well and take the matte from the third petal. Boom, and now we have the correct inversion for all three of the petals. So the more petals you have in the animation, the more attention you have to pay to the arrangement of effects. If there is a sequence in the animation that they wouldn't touch, you probably can save one or two effects on that. And now you've opened up yourself to a myriad of animation options. For instance, you can start from 0. You can only see a blank page, and then the two petals start to fly out from the sides. Or you can change the size of the petal as well so that it does a circular wipe up like so. And utilizing the track matte could also save you a bunch of time and keyframe. For instance, this animation over here usually is looking like the square is scaling up, so you need to adjust the anchor point. And then when it scales down over here, you need to change back the anchor point to up here somewhere and change the size down. And even if you attempt this operation by using a mask, for example, it is also going to take a lot of time and precision within the mask to make sure everything stays consistent. However, for this case, I only need two squares, one for the actual object moving and one acting as the mask behind. So this one I'm going to paint it to yellow so you can see it better. Yeah, so this is going to be the mask, the alpha channel that the square is lying on. And I'm just going to animate it moving diagonally from bottom right corner to the top left. And when I hide the bottom square away, it's going to look like this pretty complex zooming in and out animation that only requires 3 keyframes. A more deranged version of this setup can be found here in one of these questions in my Discord channel. And this person is asking how to set this up in After Effects. This is a DNA strand. It will be so much easier for your mental health to just set this up in a 3D program somewhere, since these bars over here are lying in the middle of these two bends. Something that requires this interchangeable appearance is a really intricate operation in After Effects, but I never back down from a challenge. So this is my setup in After Effects. I realized that the first few moments I had with this idea, I was thinking the wrong way. I was trying to recreate the two bands, basically band going band for band. Even though there are two bands twisting into each other, the faces that are on top of the bars only appears half the time. And the same applies to the one under the bars, so I broke them into groups. The groups that are on top of the bars will be the blue layers down here, and they are stroke layers affected by this wave whoop over here to create that sort of a sine wave effect. And they would be track matted to this new layer, which is basically the same stroke but pushed upwards for a few pixels. So we are left with the cutout portion of the original stroke inside the alpha of this new stroke. So I created another side that would go on top of the DNA bars, and the same applies to the one underneath the bar as well. And so yeah, all it's left to do is to push the bars into the middle. I mean, yes, there is a few rough edges that needs to be smoothened out, but overall I think with a few hours of craftsmanship, this DNA strand will come out looking pretty nice. So finally, my third point is that track matting strengthens your intuition for constructing a good transition, which as far as visual storytelling goes, it is as important as they come. So as an example, I'll examine my last video, which contains these two videos, one of the comet traveling along, and one is a zoomed in version that shows more details, and I needed to make the connections between these two scenes via a transition. What I could do is making a simple hard cut like this, or since the comet is pretty far away, a jump cut like this to pretty much tie in the motion. In both cases, I felt like they worked pretty well, but the sudden change in scenery, I felt like just break up the flow of the video a little bit. So I'm needing something a little bit more sophisticated. So what I could do is, using a shape layer, draw out a simple 2-circle setup and make sure the circles are filled inside of the ellipse path. I'm gonna drop down the size a little bit and move it to the left like so, and duplicate that and move this one to the opposite side. And with that done, we can take the track matte of video number 2, put that onto the shape, and now it's gonna look like we are looking at the second video through a pair of binoculars. So I want to hide away the background as well, which is now currently occupied by video 1. So I'm gonna put it a new solid, make sure it's all black, hit OK, and then put it underneath video number 2. I'm gonna parent that to the shape layer. So when we're moving around the binoculars, we're also moving around the background. And once I slide in the pair of binoculars, there's nothing stopping me from zooming into the second scene by scaling up the binoculars. And sticking with that theme, what I did before was faking a sort of a magnifying glass look by using one layer as a mask as well as the basis for all additional details, using the layer's ability to act as mask for multiple layers. So first, I matted the second video into the alpha of a circular shape layer. And then I use a stroke version of that shape layer, acting as an outline for the magnifying glass. And then who doesn't love some details, so another stroke on top of everything, acting as a light ray effect onto the lens from a hypothetical light source over here somewhere. And some additional textures like some bokehs and some dirty, dusty lens details to really sell that look, all masked into the same layer. And finally, some additional effects like camera lens blur and CC lens with the center of the effect tied to the motion of the lens mask in order to give all the objects down below some distortion at the edges of the lens. And that is our device to briefly introduce the audience to the second scene before we completely dissolve into it. In any case, it's a much more playful and smoother way to transition, and tying into the first point, it adds more context to our scene. As with any tools in After Effects, it's not enough to know what they do, but how they're applied into the real world as well. So take a look at motion design works in the wild and decide for yourself what's track matting involved in making this sequence, and how would I set up such sequence myself. And soon, with hopefully what you've watched in the video today, it will move away from being just a technical tool to changing your approach to working with shapes or lines or footages. And as always, have a great time motion designing, and Merry Christmas!